Hello and welcome to the SFCA podcast. Our goal is to inspire travel. We want to expose you to what Miami and South Florida has to offer. From Key Biscayne to Coconut Grove, South Beach to Calle Ocho and everywhere in between. Miami is a vibrant city and offers a wide array of popular attractions and venues. Come join us. Welcome everyone. Happy New Year. Layoffs continue. How will this affect travel, business travel, group bookings, and transient travel? Experts say the latter part of the year, the hospitality industry may feel the pinch and the pain of the economy. We have experts online to give us some insight into the future. They've got their crystal ball. They're going to give us all the facts and figures. A special recognition to all the sales teams, hotel managers, and support staff that are on the call. We truly appreciate your support and insight, and also your positive comments as well. For those of you joining us for the first time, we welcome you on this call. We share facts, figures, and stats in South Florida tourism. We also have some entertaining, informative facts that we hope you will enjoy. Today, we have a treat, a data double header with Andrew and Darrell. Andrew will give us an update on South Florida, and Darrell will expand on his report. I want to ensure everybody's familiar with the chat feature. You're welcome to ask questions of the panel via the chat or the Q&A feature. We will also be giving away 2 gas cards at the end of Darrell and Andrew's presentation, as well as the end of Ceci's presentation today. So want to make sure you don't leave empty-handed. Listen, for those of you who just joined us before, listen to the question, be the first to give the right answer on the chat and win. You can only win once on the call. If you win a second time, you'll be disqualified for the next question. So we want to make sure we give everybody a chance to win the prizes. An introduction to the panel. Our staples in this program are Andrew Wobensmith from the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau, as well as Ceci Velasco from the Ocean Drive Association. Today, we are honored to have Darrell Crum, Director of Hospitality Analytics for South Costar Group, better known to most of us as the Star or the Star Reports. So without further ado, I turn the microphone and presentation over to Andrew. Go ahead.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Great to see everybody here on a Monday morning. Lots of things going on. And as to what Miguel just said, if you like data, today's your lucky day because we've got lots and lots of data to share with you folks, but all really great stuff. I know that I've worked diligently. I know Darrell's worked diligently, and we hope to give you a really good picture today of what's going on, not just here, but also some other areas of the country, which I think Darrell could elaborate on a little bit more and provide us really with that full picture that a lot of you are looking for as you plan and try to look ahead. So with that, I'm going to share my presentation here. Let me know when you see it.
We see it. Go ahead.
All right. Very good. Okay. Well, for those of you that have been on these calls regularly, you know that I usually start out with some. Usually, like to start out with some more qualitative research, or I like to talk about economics a little bit, and then we talk about the industry. And today is going to be pretty much the same thing. However, I'm going to stay as much away from hotel as possible, given that Darrell is going to have so much more context in a hotel. But that actually gives me an opportunity to focus on other areas. And that said, I've never really put this out there, but for those of you that want to hear different topics from month to month, please feel free to reach out to Miguel or myself and say, hey, maybe next month, could you talk about something else, talk about this, that? I'm happy to do that. It actually gives me a way to focus a little bit more on what it is I want to share with you every month. So, by all means do so. But today, the order is going to be what we see going on a macro level, as well as on a local level, and then where we think we're going from there. So start here. So this was a quote that I came across as I was putting this together, and I thought it was interesting because it makes me think about business in general. But this person who had been quoted, she's the head of one of the largest marketing research companies in the world. And she said, I think driving value in 23 is going to be really important. There's a huge change coming. If you can drive value, the more attention on what's the return on investment that I'm seeing here, if you can answer that question, it's a positive outlook for you. So that kind of resonated with me because I think about how companies and businesses, whatever that may be, whatever you are, and the challenges that you have in order to stay competitive, and particularly from a cost perspective. And we have to remind ourselves that sometimes, value is not always about costs, although, it is and it isn't. It depends upon what it is in your business. But this brought to mind my father. My father was an attorney, and actually him and his father practiced together in a small firm. I remember my father once told me, he says, we're not a big firm. We don't necessarily keep up to those other firms in some ways. He said, well, what we provide, the value we provide is service. And he used to talk about the service that he would provide. They couldn't compete in some other areas. And I always thought about that. And that really applies to anything business oriented, is that what can we provide? Oftentimes, what can we provide for the least amount of cost that's going to have the biggest bang for the buck here? So that's really what I'm really putting out here. This person really said it well. As we all know, there are things, economics out there that are very challenging. So when people think about cost and price, this comes to mind. So let's start out with a new study here by NerdWallet. I remember I see NerdWallet, I always laugh because it's a funny name. So they must obviously know what they're talking about. They're NerdWallet. So according to NerdWallet's new study, they say, hey, U.S. households have now reached a record 16.5 trillion in debt. That's almost 8% from a year ago. So that is a big deal. People are certainly starting to dig a little deeper in terms of paying for things. Mortgages, auto loans, and overall debt's also gone up. Student loan has gone down a little bit, not a lot, but it has dropped a little bit. But some of the big takeaways from this study that I saw was that credit card balances, they are going up and up. They're carrying more and more balances from month to month. That is obviously not a great thing for a number of reasons. The stat that really grabbed me was that the average household owed about $222,000 in mortgages, which is really not big of a deal. $17,000 in credit card debt on average really was a shocker. Now, maybe for some people, it's not a big deal. $17,000 credit card debt is not a lot, but it certainly seems like an awful lot to me. So, with that kind of a balance here, you can think about what's going on out there. And this person I quoted at the bottom, she said it really well. Credit card debt is often thought to be the result of frivolous spending, but for many Americans, it's not true. It's just consumers are feeling the squeeze of higher prices and interest rates. Paychecks aren't keeping up. That's forcing many to make tough decisions, going into debt to pay for necessities. So very ominous words in some respect. But when we think about inflation and we think about interest rates, right, they're obviously related. But when you're a consumer, both of them really hit you very hard. So it's not just the fact that things are costing more, but in terms of the interest rates as they have been rising, when you're carrying your revolving debt, you're carrying credit card debt. What's happening to your credit card debt as well? It's going up more and more. So this is an issue that's been going on. We've talked about this for quite a while now, but this is what we see in the industry. This is what we see, on a whole level, on a macro level, and on a micro level. So another little blurb here. This was a line that I grabbed from one article I read. The average American family lost $7,400 in annual income from 2 years ago. So what that really comes down to is it's a mixture of the cost of goods. That's a part of it, and then it's the interest that people are paying combined. According to this study, and this is how much an average American family lost. They released data about 2 weeks ago, actually, now that prices have risen 13.7% from 2 years ago. The CPI has risen. Now, that chart down there to the right, that bar chart represents the monthly CPI increase for the last 2 years. You can see that obviously, and we all know this by now, the prices have shifted quite a bit, got very, very high in terms of overall percent change year over year into the summer, peaked, so to speak, and then has fallen a little bit. Now, when I hear people talk about the CPI, depending upon the narrative they're trying to talk about, they might say, oh, the CPI, it's cooling, right? It's cooling. Does anybody here, do they feel cooling in their pocketbooks? I don't. It means that the prices are still going up. They're just not going up as much. So when they talk about a CPI of 7% or 6%, that's not the full picture. The full picture is the prices, how far the prices have gone up from 2 years ago when we really started to see this. And there's a lot of reasons why these prices are going up. But obviously, what the issue here now is not just the prices going up, but as the Fed tries to increase the interest rates in order to quell some of that inflation, it hits us that way as well, right? So on one end, we're paying more. The other end, we're paying more for credit card debt. So that ends up being just not a great picture for any of us. And so, some of the stats here on the left that I picked up, the first one, I just picked it out right away. Eggs up 189.9% in the past 2 years. Now, I'm not a big consumer of eggs, so it hasn't really concerned me that much, but it stuck out to me. And, I had a text from my dog walkers. I'll share this real quick. I had a text last week. She texted me saying, you haven't paid me. You haven't paid me. And it was just a matter of me forgetting to pay her. But her joke was, well, you can just start to pay me in eggs from now on. And it made me laugh because I thought, why would you want payment in eggs? And then I realized, it's just because they cost so much. So that text went along, on and on. And, I said, maybe I'll get some chickens. And so, when you come by my dog's out, just grab yourself some eggs and we're good to go. So bottom line, the prices are going up. They've been going up. Things like ground beef up 21%. Gasoline, as we all know, has also obviously gone back up again, as we saw, from dipping down a little bit in the fall. So overall, these prices, while maybe the CPI has quote unquote cooled a little bit, overall the prices are still going up. And truthfully, I really miss the old prices, but hey, welcome to the new prices. That's what they are. In terms of prices, high travel prices are costed to travel morale. That was a headline of the study that's being done by Destinations Analyst. This was released January 18th. Almost basically 45% of American travelers said travel has been too expensive. It's been keeping them from keeping as many trips as they would have liked to in the last 6 months. That is now statistically tied with gas prices, the number one travel deterrent. More specifically, they mentioned air. For 30%, they said it was just too expensive. It's just keeping them from traveling as much as they'd like to. So again, prices continue to plague everybody, but certainly travelers. Another thing I thought was interesting, but not necessarily negative, was 2/3 of American travelers agree that they're currently being very careful with their money because they're concerned about an upcoming recession. Well, that's insightful. So what that really means is that most people are not going to be surprised about what we see going on in the market, and they are all they would say the majority of people, according to the study, are expecting to see some type of financial turbulence in the coming year. So that said, a lot of people that they surveyed there said, well, they don't necessarily think it's going to be that bad, because most of the people there are saying that they believe their financial situation is going to still improve in the next year. So that's good. That means that expectations, although they do realize that things are going to start to get a little bit hairier out there, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be suffering as much as they would have thought if things are going to be worse. Excuse me. Expectations to travel and spend are the same levels they were a year ago. That's really great. And as we know, this last year has been another record for tourism. However, in this survey, when they ask these people the types of things that they think are going to experience in the next year while they're traveling, well, there are concerns out there about price gouging, right? We know that happens in certain areas. We've had these issues here in Miami from time to time. And this is something that people are saying is a concern. They go somewhere, they don't want to get gouged for fees. They don't want to get gouged. They don't want to be charged $40 for a drink or a huge gratuity, that could go. You just think about all these different things that can happen to you while you're traveling. There are expectations of labor shortages. So we have seen that where service has suffered in some areas as a result of not having the staff that was needed. Another one too, which was interesting, they just say an increasingly frustrating domestic travel experience overall. So some of that stuff could be tied to things like, we know the air delays that we've been seeing over the last several months have been a pain point for many people. They were not necessarily foreseen. We've seen this over and over again. Last week, I think, we even had some more issues. So travelers are very wary when it comes to not just prices. It's about the things that they're going to encounter while it is they're traveling. In terms of barriers, we have some of our own consumer research here at GMCVB. This is our Florida resident study that we run once a month. We trend data. We ask people the same questions every month, and we track some of these responses. This particular question I track because I look for certain things to see if there's a trend of what's preventing people from traveling, but more specifically traveling to our destination. So number one, I look to see, how many people are saying it's too expensive. And fortunately, that number is very low. So what that's saying is, on a macro level, if you talk about travelers are being very cautious, here in this question comes up to people when they're asked where they want to go in Florida. Those that said they wouldn't come to Miami Beach, we asked them, why? Why wouldn't you come here? And so again, not too many people are saying it's too expensive. That's great. Really what it comes down to is increased competition from other destinations. So you see there at the top of the list, would rather visit other locations in Florida and outside of Florida. So, the competition is fierce. I think Darrell probably has some information about how other destinations are doing relative to ours, but we see now with other places that are opening up, it's not going to just be about cost. It's expensive to go anywhere really at this point in time. So it's about competition. Here's a little study I found by U-Haul. Now everybody knows who U-Haul is, right? So it's big orange trucks that we see driving all over the road. And if you've been coming to this call every month, you know that I love to talk about these types of statistics. These little studies that I think are interesting because U-Haul is a very simple company. They just rent trucks and trailers, and they rent millions of trucks a year. that go all over our country. So they can simply look at places and say how many trucks are going from one area to another. In terms of their one-ways, they're looking at their growth index is really just looking at the net gain of one-way U-Haul trucks arriving in one destination from another. And so Florida was ranked number 2 growth state for the second year in a row. Texas was number 1. Top 3 for the 7th consecutive year. The losers, California, Illinois, Michigan, are really, there are a lot of people making a mass exodus out of those states, coming to other areas. Certainly Florida is one of them. We do see that in 2022, the people arriving to Florida one way decreased from 2021. So really we saw a mass exodus starting about mid 2020 into 21, but now we see in 22, while we still saw a lot of people coming to Florida, there was a slight drop from the year prior. We also see that departures from Florida have also declined. So they're basically coming here and they're staying here. So on the other end of that, California, Illinois were ranked 50th and 49th respectively on the losses for the 3rd consecutive year. So they're still not happy about that. A little quote by a U-Haul company of Gainesville president. I thought this was interesting. He says, "You're going to have a better employment rate in Florida than anywhere else in the U.S. There are plenty of job opportunities and businesses and residents find the tax benefits here very attractive." As many of us, hey, I'm a transplant from the Northeast. I moved here. One of the very many reasons was the taxes were better. So in Florida, the growth markets are actually a lot of markets that are north of us. Some of these other areas like Ocala, Palm Bay, Lakeland, Miami, they list it as a growth market, maybe not so much as some of the other areas in Florida right now. Speaking of employment, let's take a look and see how we did here for employment for this last year as well as prior. So that top table is what employment numbers were like in December of 2019, 21, and 22. The top line there is Miami-Dade County. That's all employment. And we can see there that the gains have been really great versus a year prior as well as pre-pandemic. We've seen about a 5% increase in overall jobs, which is, again, great. Compared to Florida, Florida was really on par as well. Florida has not decreased. It has only increased. And then the line chart down there at the bottom shows what those monthly numbers look like for leisure and hospitality jobs, 2019, 21, and then 22. And if you look at that middle line, that middle blue line is where we were at this last year every month. And so there was a solid recovery. As of last summer, we started to see the number of leisure and hospitality jobs here in Miami-Dade County. They met where we were at pre-pandemic, so that was a really great thing. And they pretty much leveled off, and we're relatively close to where we're at in 2019. I will say that while it looks like we've just about gained those jobs back, we also know that in some areas like hotels, as many of you who are on this call are hoteliers would understand, in some cases you're still having trouble finding people, and that's because we look at there's still a squeeze. There's still a squeeze on the lower paying jobs, quite honestly. And a lot of people, as we've talked about in the last several months here, have actually moved out as well. We've had an influx of people coming here, but it's also very expensive to be here. We have seen people also leave. So there still could be some challenges out there. We know, looking at these job numbers, I think about, well, it's great that we are back to 2019, but we probably have 10% more hotel inventory since 2019. So there could be some challenges there. I'm sure if you're a property owner out there, you might be seeing this and feeling this as well. Real quick, I know there's a lot of data on this slide. I don't want to bog us down too much in here, but what I've done here is I've just consolidated some of the big tourist metrics here in Miami-Dade County. Looking at the top table there, it's just air arrivals. We look at MIA, but also Fort Lauderdale. The story here is that MIA has not only blown past 2021, but we've certainly been running well above 2019 in record numbers of arrivals. Fort Lauderdale has made a recovery as well, but they are not where we are at right now. They continue to lag behind 2019. Looking down here at the second table there with Port Miami, the good news of Port Miami is, although certainly we were stalled by the end of last year, the cruising industry has come back so strong. Looking at October numbers, which are the most recent ones that I have, October of 22 blew away 2019, up over 7%. So the volume of passengers continue to not only climb over at the port, but exceed 2019, which was a record year. So really great things. I hear really great things are going on at the port in 2023 as well. Finally, the last two tables, home sharing and hotel. The story here is that home sharing has seen some increases, such as in rate, just as we would expect with hotel. But actually, home sharing occupancy has been falling for the last several months. It was up year over year for the entire year. But in December, we can see here that it was down almost 10%. And that is a trend that we see continuing. We do see occupancy falling year over year for home sharing. Certainly down there at the bottom of the hotel, I think most of us here already know what the hotel picture has been like. We've seen great performance, but even in December, we saw that we did see drops in occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR here for Miami-Dade County hotels. So some of that really is probably a lot more to do with the fact that in December of 2021 was an extremely strong December. I mean, Art Basel was was even stronger than this last year. So I would expect to see some of those declines, but also I think it signals that we have already reached the top in terms of ADR. We talked about this for over a year. When was ADR going to stop climbing? And we see that it's finally gotten to a place where we don't believe it's going to be going up anymore. The 90-day picture, looking out, this is what we're showing here is hotel and short-term rentals, 90 days by day, the reserved occupancy, and then what it was a year prior. And this is giving us an idea of how we're measuring versus a year prior. And so at the top there, hotel, we have in blue bars, that is a reserved occupancy for the next 90 days each day. And then that dotted line represents what it was exactly 1 year prior. And this gives us an idea of where we're headed. And so for the short term, things look excellent. Obviously, those blue bars are way above those red dotted lines. But as we move further out, that changes a little bit. And actually in April, we are starting to see some softness the first couple of weekends in April. And I'm not really showing anything more beyond this, but we are seeing some more softness further out. I'm sure Darrell will once again be able to add a little bit more to that conversation. But the news here is that in the short term, hotel bookings look good. A little further out is not quite as strong as it was a year prior. Short-term rentals, as I already alluded to, we are seeing some drops in overall occupancy, and that is going to continue based upon what we see here. Brazil, real quick here. I put a slide together about Brazil because a lot of things have been going on in Brazil, good and bad in the news, as I'm sure many of us have heard. But really the great news here, again, because it's so important to us as a visitor market, we see that the flight capacity has resumed. There's a lot more capacity coming in from Brazil, both in MIA as well as Fort Lauderdale. They are picking back up again. Matter of fact, with LATAM, they've restored 14 times a week flight to MIA, which was back to what they were in 2019. So they're definitely bullish and very positive about bringing more Brazilians here. And then, excuse me. And then the really great thing here is that we know that there's been a lot of issues with visas in Brazil, and we see that issue is starting to resolve itself. So we've actually seen more issuances of U.S. visas to Brazilians, the highest in like 7 years. So they have really addressed that problem in Brazil and started to get people signed back up again. Now, if you're getting a new visa, your first visa in Brazil, and you want to come here, it's going to take a while. It's going to take over a year. Those times are still an issue. There's still a barrier for some. But overall, we're still seeing a very solid influx of Brazilians. As a matter of fact, through September of last year, Brazilians were the second highest international travel market into MIA of all the international markets. So that is just fantastic. That just shows that we are getting back to where we were at pre-pandemic. Brazil was one of our top markets before, and they are becoming our top market again. So, and then finally, there's a little research that I found in the bottom, a little blurb that it suggested that while Brazilian luxury travelers, which are oftentimes our visitors, they're not quite traveling yet to what they were doing pre-pandemic. However, 50% of those that they surveyed said that their budget's going to actually increase. So they are already anticipating spending a lot more money than they were before. So that'll be great news for us. And their top international destination that they want to visit is the United States. Looking at our visitor markets here in Miami-Dade County, you'll see for the first 9 months of last year that we blew away the year prior, particularly with domestic. It was up 35%. Overall, we were up very much so over the prior year. Matter of fact, as of the first 9 months of 2022, we were up to 21.8 million visitors. Is that good? Is that bad? Well, the prior year, 2021, was a record at 24.2 million. So you could do some very easy, simple math here and say, will we be breaking another record? And well, I think yes, of course. You know, we're going to easily blow past the numbers that we saw in 2021. In terms of our top markets, Colombia, once again, Canada, Brazil, even Argentina. Interestingly, with Colombia, we do see a decline year over year, but we also know that in 2022, we had a record number of Colombians that came into both Miami as well as Florida. So we do see a drop. It is somewhat of a drop, but they are still our number one market. Canada is at number two. Brazil, as we just talked about, we are now seeing the fruits of those efforts, and Brazil being number three. In terms of the domestic, there's nothing really surprising here. all those gains are showing because of the massive gain in volume that we see coming from domestic travel. Now, a couple more charts dealing with feeder markets. This table here represents the next 3 quarters in terms of international inbound airfare sold to MIA through travel agencies, and those travel agencies do include Expedia and so forth. So to give you an idea of how important that is, about 50% of all the tickets being sold into MIA are coming in through travel agencies, which would include the OTAs. So that is a big chunk of ticket. It's not everything. It's not airfare that's being purchased directly from these airlines, but it represents a very big amount of people coming here. And so what we see here is that for the next 3 quarters, Argentinians are actually buying the most through travel agencies for the upcoming 3 quarters, followed by Canada, Brazil, and so forth. One thing I will note here that's interesting is that we are seeing our European markets creep back up again, which is really great to see. As a matter of fact, in Q1, we see Germany's number 7 in terms of the number of tickets sold, but then they jump up to number 3 in Q2 and number 2 in Q3. So there's certainly a lot of momentum coming from European markets, Germany, Italy, even the UK, as you can see, is jumping up that list. So we're even starting to see them go above what our traditional Latin American markets were. So we expect to see a lot more people coming from overseas in the very near future. Another chart very similar to that. I know it's a little bit to adjust your eyes to, but what I'm showing here is what this is the planned seat capacity to MIA. For those of you that may not know what that is just simply the number of seats that are being designated by all the airlines coming into MIA. Pull them all together and say, where are the most seats going to be allocated to, and where the least amount of seats being allocated to, and are they allocating more or less seats? So this is really a way for us to understand what the airlines are thinking, or where they think they're going to see demand coming into MIA. And much like we've seen, they are saying, yes, we expect to see less in terms of Colombia. We expect to see less in terms of Mexico. They've allocated a lot more for Cuba, about flat for the DR. But we also see that they anticipate more travel coming from Brazil, the UK, some of these other destinations, Bahamas too, which is interesting in itself. So that's really about it. In summary, as I mentioned, inflation, along with everything that comes with it, it's not going away. It is affecting consumer decisions. It is going to make people think about their finances. But once again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is an opportunity to think about how to provide value and really look at those things that provide you with that true ROI. We see that barriers to Miami on the domestic market are not really price related. It's about competition. Furthermore, the Florida job market, as I mentioned, is very healthy. Miami-Dade is also doing very well from that standpoint. We see that leisure and hospitality employment is pretty stable and right about where it was a couple of years ago. International, as I just mentioned to you, is building momentum. We see great news coming in. Maybe next month I'll pick another country, but we see great things. We see Brazilians, we see Europeans, Canadians returning. And finally, and this will be, I guess, a point to leave off on, will be that while tourism metrics have been great, we are starting to see a little bit of softness, some year-over-year declines in terms of the momentum of paid lodging booking activity. So with that, I will, I know it was a mouthful. Hopefully you got something out of it. This presentation will be available to you. And I'll point out too, in the bottom corner of these slides, some of these areas, you can click on these sites where I get this information. And if you want to check up on it and maybe dig into it further. So that's it.
Thank you, sir. And you're going to segue over to Darrell?
Absolutely. Well, I want you guys to meet Darrell Crum. He's a great guy. I'll mention that Darrell was my counterpart at Orlando, at Visit Orlando. So I've gotten to know him for the last couple of years before he made a move to STR. So Darrell has a really great, obviously a very great view of tourism, having worked in the same position as mine for, again, one of the biggest destinations in Florida and certainly in the country. He understands Florida tourism, which is something I really, when I talk to people like Darrell, I can really share notes and get an idea of what's going on. But now he works for STR, so he's going to be able to give us a much bigger picture of what's going on in the hotel industry. So with that, I'm just going to stop there. I've done a lot of talking, and I will let Darrell pick up the ball.
Thank you, Andrew, and good morning, everyone. As Andrew said, I was with Visit Orlando. I was there for actually about 20 years in market research and insights. A little over a year ago, moved to the Costar Group. And if you're not familiar, the Costar Group acquired STR in 2019. So your star reports, your hotel data, that is now, that's us. That's the Costar Group. So I cover hospitality for Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, pretty much the Southeast, which, given my experience in Orlando, as Andrew said, I feel like I have a pretty good feel for the Florida tourism market. So I look forward to sharing some of my insights. The way this is going to flow, we'll wrap up 2020 with some year-end stats. And what we'll see is at a high level, it was a great year. But then I'm going to point to a few little things that began to emerge in the second half of the year that is going to really kind of feed into how we think about 2023. And I'll share STR's forecast, not just for the Miami market, but for really the top 40 lodging markets, including several other Florida markets. So you can see where Miami fits into the overall landscape. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. Oops, I think I shared the wrong screen. My apologies. There we go. Okay. So we'll start just by looking at hotel demand. So this is for calendar year 2018 through 2022. And the key takeaway, the good news is that 2022 was a record. So a record year for hotel demand in the Miami market. Not many markets can say that. The Florida markets have performed extremely well, been among the first to rebound, some of the strongest rebounds. So in particular, as for a while there, cruises, a lot of international travel, a lot of those things were unavailable due to COVID-related restrictions. The Florida beach markets benefited from that and rebounded very well. However, we take hotel demand and translate to hotel occupancy. Miami's occupancy rate in 2022 was about 72%, and that's 4 to 5 points behind where it was before the pandemic, 2018, 2019. So we stop and think, well, if we have the highest demand ever, why is occupancy lagging behind? And that's supply growth. That's new rooms that have come online in the last 2 or 3 years. And at the very end of my presentation, we'll take a look at some of that inventory growth and see the impact it's had on the recovery and occupancy. But what has really set this recovery apart from any prior downturn, whether it was the Great Recession after 9/11 and the 2001 recession, those were characterized by demand and occupancy coming back first, rate lagging behind. It's been the exact opposite this time. This has been a rate-led recovery. So here's Miami's ADR for calendar year 2022, over $250, well above where it was pre-pandemic. Even with the inflation that Andrew alluded to, Miami's hotel growth or hotel rate growth has been above the rate of inflation. So while many markets are still below 2019 in a real terms when you adjust for inflation, Miami is not. Miami has performed extremely well. And to Andrew's point, we've been asking ourselves for months now, how long can this be maintained? At what point do we start to hit a ceiling? And we may already be seeing that as we'll look at in a moment. And then if you combine occupancy and ADR, the metric that most hotels tend to rely on is RevPAR, because this combines them both into one single metric. And RevPAR in Miami is also at record levels, largely rate driven, because again, occupancy has not fully recovered. So the RevPAR growth is coming on the rate side. It's all ADR driven at this point. And we can compare that to the top 40 markets. And Miami was the second best recovery of the 40 largest lodging markets. So this is comparing 2022 RevPAR against the pre-pandemic or 2019, using that as a baseline. And you see Miami was second after Tampa. But if you look at those top 5 or 6, look at how many of them are Florida markets: Tampa, Miami, Jacksonville, Fort Lauderdale, and then Orlando. Orlando's really been kind of a late comer to this. If we'd looked at this back early last year, Orlando was in the bottom half. Orlando's recovery was triggered by the return of group meetings last year, and that really helped elevate Orlando. But the top markets have all been Southeast beach-driven markets, with the exception of Phoenix. That's where we've seen the strongest recovery. So then the question becomes, how much can that carry over when you see places like Miami and Tampa doing so well? You look at the bottom right at some of the urban markets like a Philadelphia, DC, the California markets. How much Florida has outperformed? Can that continue into 2023? We think so, but rate is a concern because as you see here, and as I've alluded to, Miami, Tampa, Jacksonville, it's all been rate driven. Occupancy is still below 2019 levels, and that's true for all of the top 40 markets. Tampa and Jacksonville have come close. Their occupancy is almost back, but none of the top 40 markets have recovered in occupancy. So this is rate driven. So when you think about some of the economic concerns and the inflation that Andrew's alluded to and the impact that's having on consumer spending, as consumer debt levels inch up, how long will consumers continue to pay these high prices? So that's the question going into 2023. A couple of things we observed in 2022 that will also impact our outlook for 23. A little bit busy here, so let me walk through on the left. So this is separating occupancy into two key buckets, transient versus group. Group is basically your conventions and group meetings. What you see in the transient occupancy is steep year-over-year declines. That's the light green bars. You look at May and June. Transient occupancy in 2022 was below 2021 levels. It fell below 2020 levels again in November and December. What we're starting to see is that there were factors in place in 2021 that really drove activity, drove business to the Florida markets and to South Florida. They were COVID-related changes in travel patterns that created really robust demand. By the middle of 22, that was beginning to kind of wane a little bit. We were starting to see travel shift back as some of the Northeast urban markets began to open up. New York has experienced a very robust recovery in the second half of the year. We began to see international travel pick up. The strong US dollar has been encouraging that. We began to see cruising pick up, and Andrew alluded to that with the Port of Miami. So there's simply more competition, and as a result, we began to see some early signs that perhaps transient demand was beginning to become more dispersed. Group occupancy, on the other hand, has continued to recover throughout the year. That's the return of group business, strong year-over-year growth every month last year. By the fourth quarter, group demand was almost back to pre-pandemic levels. And we think that will continue into 2023, and we think group is going to continue to approach those pre-pandemic levels this year. Now, as occupancy began to show a few signs of softness, we saw the same thing on ADR. So after that strong ADR growth at the beginning of the year, by June and July, 2022 was actually below 2021 ADR. Still above 2019, but below prior year levels. Same thing happened again in December. Starting to see signs that the growth in ADR is at or near a peak. How much longer can it continue? And another way we see that is if we look at a rolling 12-month average of ADR. So the light blue line, very jagged line, that's your monthly, and that shows a lot of seasonal variation. But the dark blue line is a rolling 12-month average. And if you look to the far right, after that rapid, incredible growth in 2021, first half of 22, by the second half of last year, that blue line was beginning to plateau. And in fact, even maybe decline just a little bit. So as Andrew said, we think we're starting to see signs that ADR growth may have finally reached a peak. Not sure we can continue to drive it in the face of inflation and the economic slowdown as expected. So here's our forecast for the year. So this is taking 2019 as a baseline and then projecting future years as a percentage of that pre-pandemic level. So in 2021, RevPAR, the purple line, and ADR, the blue line, had already fully recovered, a full year ahead of many of the top markets across the US. Demand, the orange line, was back to 2019 levels in 2022. So at this point, occupancy is the only metric still below that pre-pandemic level, and that's due to the supply growth that we'll look at in a moment. So going ahead to 2023, we are now forecasting that ADR and RevPAR are going to decline slightly in 2023. We think most of that will come second and third quarter of the year. First quarter should do okay. We've got the opportunity for some strong year-over-year growth due to the impact of Omicron in the first quarter of last year. So I think we'll get through Q1 with fairly robust growth, but then we are currently forecasting, we've built into our lodging forecast a mild recession mid-year. And that's when we think we'll start to see the effects. We think some of that decline in ADR will come from the demand mix. So as group recovers, as business travel recovers, that will be at lower corporate negotiated rates. So that demand mix will weight down ADR somewhat. We also think there could be some trading down of the leisure demand segment. So because of high rates, compounded by inflation and the economic situation, we may see leisure travelers trade down in the hotel class or the tier they stay at. So that would pull down the average rate. So even if we don't see widespread price cutting by hotels, those shifts in the demand mix could cause the overall average to decline in 2023. Now, somewhat unusual to see a rate decline forecasted, but the orange line demand is actually forecasted to go up. It's a little odd to see that combination. We think there's still some runway left with international travel, and as I alluded to on the group side. So we think overall demand will be flat to slightly up, but that shift in demand mix or some trading down among the demand will cause rate and by extension RevPAR to go down. And instead of the lines, if you want to see the actual numbers, here's the actual forecast from STR for 2023. So we're forecasting about a 2% drop in occupancy despite demand growth. That is your inventory, the new rooms coming online. ADR down about 4, and then if you combine OCC and ADR, you get RevPAR down between 5.5% and 6%. So here's the comparison to the top 40 markets for RevPAR. So a little bit busy. What we're looking at are the bars show 2023's forecast as a percentage of 2019. So if you want to feel sorry for any markets, you look to the far right and you see in 2023, San Francisco, San Jose, Portland, Minneapolis, some of those markets that are still 4 years later, not fully recovered to pre-pandemic levels. On the far left are the markets that are fully recovered. Now, the little light purple diamond, that is the year-over-year growth for 2023. So if we spot Miami, so Miami's forecast for RevPAR is to be down about 5.5%, but still compared to 2019, RevPAR would be about 16% above pre-pandemic levels. So here you can see the comparison. We see the strongest year-over-year growth to the right in those markets that are not yet fully recovered. Markets to the left that are fully recovered, that were some of the earliest and strongest recoveries, will see their growth moderate this year. So I've mentioned room inventory a couple times. So this was Miami's rooms under construction by month for several years, and we see this incredible ramp up in late 2019, just in time for the pandemic to hit and tourism to deal with those impacts. Since then, rooms under construction in Miami has generally trended down, and then in the second half of 22, rooms under construction dropped sharply. And what's going on here is that rooms under construction are coming to market at a faster rate than new construction is getting underway. We're seeing a slowdown in new construction starts. The price of debt, if you're financing that construction, has gone way up because of the Fed's interest rate increases. We're seeing the price of a lot of construction inputs, steel, electrical, concrete, things like that going up. And those factors are slowing new construction. So that's causing the number of rooms under construction to fall as openings are not being replaced by new starts. So openings in 2022 were about 2,500, and you can see the number has gone up every year since 2019. And that corresponds with that big jump in rooms under construction in 2019 and 2020, those rooms coming to market. So looking ahead to this year, right now there's about 1,200 to 1,300 rooms under construction, and that have said they plan to open in 2023. So if those all materialize as expected, growth in the inventory will be the slowest since 2019. So that actually, in this case, is kind of a good thing. If we do see a tourism slowdown because of the economy, fewer rooms coming to market will have less of an impact on occupancy and by extension ADR. And then into 2024, there's about 600 rooms under construction. But the lighter shaded bars, those are rooms in final planning. So these are rooms that are completing the permitting process, haven't actually started moving dirt, they're not under construction, but they are very close to or ready to move to construction. If those follow through, we're going to see inventory begin to pick up again in 24 and then really in 2025. But because of the reasons I just said, I won't be surprised if the timeline on those projects gets delayed. Interest rate, debt financing cost, and construction costs. And then for context, the way we like to look at rooms under construction is the rooms under construction as a percentage of the existing inventory. Nationally, that ratio is about 2.8%. So Miami's a little on the high side at about 3.5%, although that has been coming down. A year ago, the rooms under construction in Miami was over 4.5% of existing inventory. So we're seeing that number come back down towards the national average. And again, that will alleviate some of the supply side pressure that's been affecting occupancy over the last year or two. So that's the end of my prepared slides. If there's time, I'm happy to take questions, or also can follow up afterwards if there are any questions.
Anyone have any questions? If you do, please give them on the chat feature. Courtney, I hope you enjoyed all this data. I'm sure you're enjoying most of it, all, if not all of it. Of course, you love it. We will be sharing all the both decks with you after the show as well. Thank you, Elba, for your comments. All right, real quick, Andrew, if you want to give us a question for a $50 gas card, could be pertaining to the to your presentation or Andrew's or Darrell's presentation, or it could be a trivia question. Everyone ready on your chat feature? Andrew, go ahead.
Very simple. I can never make them hard. I looks like I have a terrible memory, so if you ask me, I might not remember. But I will say I mentioned visitor numbers, and I mentioned a record visitor number in the past. What was our record visitor number?
Record visitor number. I have a date and I have a country so far.
How many?
There we go. 17 million?
Nope.
No. That's a tough one. 28%? No. I think it's a number, not a percentage or city or date or country, in that matter. I thought you were going to ask the egg question. I could have sworn it would have been the egg question.
I'm surprised. I guess nobody's really paying attention.
5 million?
No.
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 You want to try another question?
Here's an easy one. how much?
23 million? No.
So close.
Oh.
No.
All right, we're going to try a new question. Go ahead, Andrew.
What was the rate of inflation on eggs?
Ooh, I got that one. 189.9. Woo! Let's see if somebody got the 189. I saw the 189. That's close enough. 189.9 was the first one. Heinrich, congratulations. You got the right answer. I actually wrote it down. Okay, perfect. Excellent. Congratulations, Heinrich. You got a $50 gift card, gas gift card. We will reach out to you right after the show and get it to you electronically. Excellent. Thank you very much. Darrell, thank you, Andrew, for your information. I'm sure it's a wealth of knowledge that will be shared with many. And now we will segue over to Miss Ceci. Hi, Ceci.
Oh, look, I have a big announcement.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
I said yes.
Yay. Good for you.
Big changes in everybody's lives. Love is in
does.
the air. It's interesting because I just know a whole group of people that are getting married. So I think they put it off until after COVID, and suddenly they're ready to meet in person and have big parties. Myself, I will tell you, Andrew, even though it's at our restaurants, breakfast or in cakes and pastries, or one of the reasons why menu items have gone up. And when I have promotional events, usually a lot of restaurants will give it to us or will underwrite it, and they're saying they can't do the food because it's just too costly. So I think that was really kind of a good point that you made. This is the reason why it's not only the supply chain, but it's the products themselves that are going up, which really affects our hospitality. I love that our hotel rates and ADR rates are high. If they plateau forever, I'll be happy with where they're at right now, Darrell. Thank you so much. We just don't want any dips. We want to keep it up where it is. It's really great listening to all the data. We had here on South Beach. We have a brand new executive director of the Lincoln Road Business Improvement District. Her name is Annabelle Lopez. She comes from the mall space. It's really exciting because we're seeing a lot of smaller activations. So if you're walking up and down Lincoln Road, you may hear some kind of a band or some kind of a quartet or something going on all the time. Plus they have a couple of different markets, and they had the holiday market, I think, which was great. These activations, although they don't bring heads in beds, they certainly keep people here on Miami Beach, which is, really great for us. So you see Lincoln Road thriving right now. We just came off of New Year's Eve. I produced the New Year's Eve on Ocean Drive, and we were able to expand 30 cafes. It's one of the best events that we do have on Ocean Drive, and fireworks went off right at 12:01, which stopped my heart at 12 because I didn't see the fireworks go off right away, but we had beautiful 15 minutes of fireworks that you could see from everywhere. So that's how we kicked off the year on South Beach. And the Ocean Drive Association. We continue to have our promenade series every single Sunday across from the Betsy and the El Villaggio on the north side of Lummis Park at 5 p.m. Last night was no exception. We were celebrating Miami Navy Week, and we had the Navy Rock Band. We congaed through as they ended with a Gloria Stefan tune. I can imagine which one it was, but we had a wonderful time. And we do, and thanks to the GMCVB, because they host our oceandrivearts.com webpage where we have all of the schedules and we are booked for the entire year. But these small incremental urban placemaking exercises really work. We also had Family Fun Day in Lummis Park, Ocean Front, where we had little, roller coaster for kids, a stage, a kite festival. And I hope this will be annual because it was really spectacular to see these big, beautiful kites going off right in front of the ocean in the park. But big events also bring in heads to beds. And so we're talking about, we just came off of Art Deco weekend. It was lovely having all this music in the park, all of these different seminars, all of these different talks about our historic Art Deco. We also had Art Deco tours, which was really spectacular. And we have that every year. South Beach Jazz Festival was here as well, and that was throughout the entire city. I have to tell you, the Miami Beach Band Show was my favorite because it was the Palladium 3. It was the son of Tito Puente Jr., Tito Rodriguez, and Machito. And all three of them were on stage for the first time in I don't know how long. I talked to the two older ones, and they were telling Tito Puente Jr., I knew you before you were even born. So it brought chills, and we were packed, and it was a sold out crowd. So that South Beach Jazz Festival, full disclosure, I'm on the board, is in its 7th year. Next year will be its 8th year, and it's sold out every time. These activations are really phenomenal to bring energy. We've got boat show coming up, South Beach Wine and Food Festival, winter party, right, the first weekend of March. And then the city is putting on a wonderful March activations. It's going to be focused on health and wellness this year. So we've got King of the Courts coming in, which is a European volleyball major tournament on an arena in the sand area on the beach. All kinds of other activations throughout. We're looking at kind of an art festival on Ocean Drive itself that we'll be partnering with. The city will be partnering with, and I'll be supporting as much as I possibly can. This is a wonderful thing. Miami Beach, the Rhythm Foundation at the Miami Beach Band Shell is really bringing in some stellar things. Normandy Fountain is doing wonderful things. A lot of different local flavor market type of activations. Our tourists like that, right? When you go to Paris, you're getting in a cab with a taxi driver and you're asking them, where do you go for fun? What's the local flavor? So this is all part of it, besides some of the bigger activations and tours that we have. But Miami Beach is doing that at a really nice scale. Anyway, I really enjoyed, I had the privilege of emceeing the OMG fashion show. the other day, which was really nice. It's starting to launch. It was only the second one, and this was a tribute to our dear Deanne Connolly Graham, and the proceeds went to support the womensfund.org. And I say that because if you want to contribute to the Women's Fund ORG in her name, it was only $20, and you can still do that. That was one of her favorite foundations. We miss her dearly. I think our industry will be feeling the effects of that loss, and we just need to pick up the torch and continue in with her high energy and everything she did for Miami and the beaches. So we are anyway, I'm just here. I'm really happy to contribute to this. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. DJ Hannah, who is a concierge, was the DJ at the fashion show. Yes. So I wanted to just give her a special shout out because she did a wonderful job. And she's the one that said, I recognize you from the webinars. So that was pretty fun. Miguel, you're doing a wonderful job. I think we have so much that the concierges do to support our industry, letting them know about all of these activities so they can point all of our visitors to have a really wonderful time while they're here visiting our great city is amazing. And thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Ceci, real quick, a question. Where could all that information, should they go to the Bureau's website and that has the calendar of events, or is there a separate one they can get all that information
The
from?
Bureau is the best place to find it. I mean, the Lincoln Road Business Improvement District, when they do their activations, it's kind of spontaneous. I don't really think it's scheduled in a big way. They're just infiltrating everything and putting things together. But the Bureau has most. And when it comes to Ocean Drive, it's the oceandrivearts.com, which is a page on the Bureau site. So the GMCVB is doing so much to support all of our cultural arts programming.
Cool. So oceandrivearts.com. Excellent. And you have, so this is the big point now. You have a $50 gift card to give away. You have a question to pose to the group. Could be trivia, could be any.
Okay, I got one. Who was the major act at the Miami Beach Band Show for the South Beach Jazz Festival? Let's make it easy. Yeah.
Palladium 3.
Palladium 3.
Maggie Dominguez. Congratulations, Maggie.
It was incredible. It was historic. They were incredibly moved by doing it. And the big finale was the three of them on timbales in front of the orchestra, Tito Puente style. It was wonderful.
Excellent. So Maggie is the winner. We will reach out to you and you will receive the card electronically today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Real quick, in my closing comments, allow me a second. My computer is giving me a little bit of.
And Miguel, kudos on your gala. The gala was excellent, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. It's giving me a bit of a challenge. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So thank you very much for everyone for joining us. Thank you. Congratulations to Hyrick and Maggie for winning those gas cards. We will get you those today. Again, the presentations, both decks will be available via email to everyone that subscribed and all those people that could not make it either. So again, share that information. Make sure on a Nest call, very important, February is Wine and Food Month. If you remember the last 2 years, I've had one of the presenters for the Wine and Food, and they bring prizes as well. So you will be going to one of the presentations for the Wine and Food Month. Thank you for everyone that joined us. Thank you, Darrell. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Ceci. Congratulations to our winner. Again, we will send out the notes this afternoon, if not first thing tomorrow morning. I wish you a most blessed January. Let's start the new year off great, and we'll see you next month. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Our goal is to inspire travel. We want to expose you to what Miami and South Florida has to offer. From Key Biscayne to Coconut Grove, South Beach to Calle Ocho, and everywhere in between. Miami is a vibrant city and offers a wide array of popular attractions and venues. Come join us.